सुतेषु प्रणतेषु च चरणाश्रयदानेन
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna himself arranged for that there should be a creation such as this gospel. Some of his other disciples had attempted to take notes of the discussions and the inspirational message that was constantly being shared and delivered during the time of Sri Ramakrishna's meeting so many people, so many devotees, and going to various places on invitation to again spread his life-giving and highly inspiring, highly transformative ideas. A number of people tried to take notes, and it became quite clear that Sri Ramakrishna favored M to do that particular job. One of his other disciples, I think it was Swami Vedananda, who was a young devotee at that time, also attempted to record some of the inspiring words that Sri Ramakrishna shared during his interaction with various devotees. But it was pointed out somehow he had that feeling that this was not what Sri Ramakrishna wanted him to do. Whereas M, that is Mahendranath Gupta, who is the actual compiler of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, was definitely encouraged to continue and to start first of all, and then to continue and to expand that project. So M. Mahendranath Gupta used to take these notes while Sri Ramakrishna was talking, just as a reminder, and when he returned home, he would spend hours remembering all the things that were discussed and describing them in great detail. In that way, he accumulated quite a collection of very important statements and very important events. And though there was one other disciple, I think it was Swami Vedananda, who took notes, somehow he felt that this was not appropriate for him, and he actually threw those notes into the Ganges, because it became quite clear that this Mahendranath Gupta, was the person designated and given, as it were, the responsibility for taking the message and the ideas that Sri Ramakrishna was elaborating on, was displaying, taking that and encompassing it in a volume, in a series of notes, in a series of descriptions, which later on were collected. I think he collected it into 5 volumes, which he published one after the other. And it so happened that when the last volume of his notes was finished and had been arranged for publication, he felt that his responsibility had been discharged. And as a matter of fact, a certain condition, certain medical condition that was disturbing him to some extent at that time, that medical condition became suddenly very severe. And within a short time, I think a day or two, he actually passed away with the feeling that he had done what he had come here to this world to do. Then the question was how to, or had been even before that, had been how to make that available in a language that would have a greater reach than the particular Bengali that Sri Ramakrishna spoke, and which was what M recorded initially. And so M himself translated it, his notes, into English, but it was an English of an old style with these and thous, because he was trying to translate the customs of in the Indian languages, making a difference between you addressing one person and you addressing a plural number. And but the initial translation was done by Swami Nikhilananda, the translation of the whole. M himself translated it, and his translation has a certain tremendous advantage in this respect, that it was, being the compiler, the original compiler, when he translated it, frequently in a translation there are certain slightly differing meanings or alternate significance that can be assigned to certain words. He knew exactly what he had originally intended, and whether that was carried through in the translation or not, he himself could more efficiently, more realistically decide. Of course, there were certain other things. He used the older system of these and thous, and so sometimes thou doest, thou hast done, like that. This type of expression was there. So a more modernized version was again translated, of course, by Swami Nikhilananda, who is a Bengali person, and so could compare it to the original. Anyway, the net result is that we have a very detailed description of what Sri Ramakrishna's message and significance and advent and purpose was. And The Christian Gospels were recorded by the direct disciples of Christ, but they were recorded in a different fashion and a different way, and had to be translated. They were, of course, recorded in a language. I think it was Aramaic. It could have been Hebrew, which is not at all very well known, so it was much more difficult to accomplish. But the point always is that when a great spiritual phenomenon appears, there's a tremendous effort by those who listen and those who benefit and who are inspired by the message. They feel a tremendous responsibility to translate the original language into a language that could be available to a much broader section of the population, because they realize the importance of the message. So that will always be the case when a message, because the message is given locally and the significance is universal. So in order to make that transition, there has to be a bridge that makes it possible to make this message, which is inevitably expressed in the local idiom, the local language, to make that available in a broader sense. So what is actually Sri Ramakrishna's message? Even if you read the original Bengali, you get a translation from his inspiration, from his thought, from his realization to the original language. And then you have a second translation from the original language to something that is generally understood. So when you talk about the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, or any Gospel, the Gospels of Christ, the question always is, how does it reflect the original intent, the original message that was being given? And the ultimate resolution of that is that even though the original message has somehow become to some extent diluted because it was interpreted, it has been, as they say, defiled by the human tongue, or defiled by the human attempt to try to encapsulate something which really is not encapsulatable, because the message, what the knower of Brahman is trying, the knower of God is trying to display, is trying to show, is trying to demonstrate, to communicate, is Brahman. So until one becomes a knower of Brahman, that transmission is bound to be, in some respect, partial, or an attempt rather than a guaranteed transmission. But when it comes to the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the judgment on its effectiveness first came from Swami Vedananda himself, who is still considered as the most adept disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, who has really upon whom Sri Ramakrishna gave the responsibility of spreading his message, who at the time Sri Ramakrishna passed away, Sri Ramakrishna himself gave his spiritual power to Narendra, as he was then Narendra, and as Swami Vivekananda, he felt the enormous power of that Sri Ramakrishna's message and his realization. He felt that enormous power within him. And to begin with, he had no idea how it was to be transmitted. But the fact that he was the transmitter, that through him this message would see reality, that was never in doubt for him. And he came to realize that indeed he had been able to transfer, so to speak, that realization, or to embody that realization of Sri Ramakrishna that he was supposed to transmit, that he had been able to embody that and actually communicate that into the world at large. He understood. But Swami Vivekananda himself felt that that is Mahendranath Gupta, the compiler, the author of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna that we have today, the original author, he felt that Swami Vivekananda felt that M was the messenger that had been chosen by Sri Ramakrishna to make that message available. The M's original translation of a very small section of what he had recorded while listening to Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda saw that and approved it and congratulated M on having been chosen as the messenger to carry out that great responsibility of translating what Sri Ramakrishna had experienced into something that was accessible generally all over the world. M also was a teacher, a scholar himself. He knew English, though he had recorded everything in Bengali. He himself made the first translation into English. So it is a great celebration for us to have this document, this Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, just as, and the word gospel is entirely appropriate because the gospel originally referred to the teachings of Jesus Christ as they were recorded or as they were published or elaborated by his own disciples. And the parallel of these two events, it becomes more understandable when one looks at the tremendous significance of the birth of Jesus and the equally tremendous significance of the birth of Sri Ramakrishna. In each age, the divine manifests itself. This is the grace of God. This is the real essential grace of God, that in each age it is so arranged. Who arranges it? How it's arranged, one cannot say, but in each age, each important divine communication seems to generate a a factor, a being, a personality, a system, however you want to phrase it, to actually spread that message. Otherwise, Jesus spoke to large crowds around the time when he was teaching. The crowds were quite large, and in fact, probably numbered in the thousands even. But after such a being passes away, that those who were present at that time are tremendously affected, knowingly or unknowingly, by the power of that Supreme Personality. But whether they have the capacity of elaborating it further or not, that is not guaranteed at all. So there have been many attempts. When a great personality arises, there have been many attempts to spread that information, to carry that forward. And much of that has disappeared. We don't know. There are a few records of these great teachings that remain. And among these, this Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is of extreme value, because M was a highly educated and also a teacher, so he understood the necessity of what is necessary to properly communicate. This was probably one of the great qualities that may have contributed to his being chosen by Sri Ramakrishna to record his message and to actually exhibit it in a way that would enable that message to become very widespread and available. One thing is that if the disciples of Christ had been simply people from that area concerned only with that area, it would never have become as widespread as it was. But it was part of the Roman Empire, and the people who spread the message of Christ actually used that. St. Paul himself went to various cities in the Roman Empire in order to encourage and spread the message and encourage those people who were accepting that message. So this same phenomenon took place in this case also. M was chosen for that purpose. Chosen, we think, directly because others tried to record the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, and they were not encouraged by Sri Ramakrishna in that way at all. So Swami Shivananda, who was one of the great direct disciples who eventually became president of our order and leader of the movement, he himself started to take notes. But he felt Sri Ramakrishna's disapproval when he saw him taking these notes. It had really been left for M to do, and when Swami Shivananda understood that, he threw the notes that he had started into the Ganges and no longer attempted to do that job, that task. So one can say, and also there were instances when Sri Ramakrishna would specifically ask M, who was in attendance at all these meetings that he described, he would ask him, "Did you understand?" Did you appreciate what was said? Did you get the significance of this? So it isn't something that was done haphazardly at all. There was a distinct intention, a distinct purpose that was being fulfilled by the compilation of this, which we now call the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. One is able to see the teaching in a much more significant way when one can see where the teaching was delivered, because the teacher will naturally adjust what he says to the circumstances, to the people that are around. So it is it is a huge blessing for us to be able to have this document to actually get, as it were, very close to Sri Ramakrishna, his thought, his ideas. Because after reading how many times and in how many ways these teachings were given, one, as it were, we all become members of that audience. That is the skill of the compiler, that he is able to make the people who read it later, many generations later, they read these events, and they can actually feel themselves to be part of it, to be actually there, to be actually watching it, because details, it's not only the teachings that were recorded, but also details. When Sri Ramakrishna went to see Vidyasagar, he was wearing his clothes in such a way they were not completely closed, it was not completely buttoned, his shirt and all of that. Sri Ramakrishna's mind was far above those things. With great effort, he did whatever was necessary, but sometimes it was not finished. It was partly there. He did not have, in this particular visit to Vidyasagar, he did not have his shirt buttoned in a way, and these things, even the tiniest events, were recorded by M in such a way that we feel that we're actually there watching this. It's not that he recorded only the teachings, he recorded the actual event itself. What was there, what was served, who was there, who did what. So as it were, there were no motion pictures that could be taken in those days. But short of having an actual movie of Sri Ramakrishna moving from one place to another, M's descriptions are so elaborate and so well organized, one can actually see the master moving here and there, impelled to do this and giving this advice, giving that, these thoughts, that it all becomes, we actually, as it were, become part of the scene. And that was a tribute to M's skill in describing all these events. Now, one of the meetings that is described in this Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is a meeting with this Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. And in that, it's just one example of the many meetings and events that are described in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. but it makes things so clear and so immediate, so significant. That is the message. That is the message that is being conveyed. That these events that are described in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna are not an imaginary encounter. They are an actual place in which specific teachings were given, in which specific intention, Sri Ramakrishna had a specific intention of communicating certain things. He came to this Vidyasagar's place, and he immediately felt as though this was a family that he had known, and in other words, he began to act in a very normal and conventional way. So it's something that we can relate to when we read that. It becomes our inspiration. We're actually seeing Sri Ramakrishna and participating in the discussion. And the importance of that is that if we actually if we are trying to understand the truth of things, if we're trying to understand the reality of things, one way of doing it is to discuss the scriptures. The Upanishads say this, the Bhagavad Gita says that, all these teachings, what is meant by that, that is one aspect, and that's extremely valuable and an extremely effective way of communicating a spiritual tradition, and most spiritual traditions are communicated in that way. But to see how a being who embodies the essence of that tradition, who is the prime source of the inspiration of that tradition, who actually is that tradition, that individual becomes a way of, by his very presence or her very presence, that message becomes communicated. So, when reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, it's not just that we're looking at a theory or a philosophy. We're looking at how life should be lived, how actually one who embodies that principle, embodies the basic ideas, who has the basic knowledge of that reality, how such a person conducts himself, and how he manifests in this world in ordinary situations. That is the meaning of the Gospel. The Gospels, according to Christ, do that same thing. That it shows Christ, for instance, Christ going into Jerusalem. There is a horse is tied up by the side of the road. He asks his disciple to go and untie that horse. He needs that horse. So the disciple obviously says, well, how can I do that? It is not our horse. So he says, tell whoever intercepts you that your master requires this horse, and so then he will give it to you. In other words, there's a drama associated with the actions of these great souls. The Upanishads give you the basic principles. The Bible gives you the basic principles. The Old Testament gives you the basic principles of biblical philosophy. But how do you embody that in your own life? How, if you don't have that particular factor of how the teachings can be embodied in daily life, then there comes a separation, a dichotomy. You live your life in one way, and then on Sunday you live your life in a different way. Sunday is for God, the rest of the time is for earning a living and taking care of one's family and so forth. On Sunday I go to church, I go to temple, and I think about God, and that is fine. And at the other days I do things that are required by these other things that I have to do. The point is that every moment of one's life should become spiritually inspiring. Every moment of our life is, in a sense, could be considered our first moment and our final moment. Every moment of life is a chance for us to realize God. It isn't that only when we go to the temple and attend the classes and the lectures, or when we go to the churches and sit in the pews or attend communion or whatever, that is spirituality. The rest of the time I do what is necessary to maintain my existence in this world. Every aspect of existence, every moment of our life should be lived with the understanding that the basic reality is God, the infinite, the perfect, the eternal, however you want to phrase it. Every moment of our life is a spiritual moment. There is no dichotomy between the life of the world and the life of the spirit. We think it is when we do our jobs, we go to our offices and all that, we go by a certain set of rules, and then when we go to the temple or to the church or go home, there's a different set of rules. That is not conducive to this idea. Is not conducive to this philosophy, is not an embodiment of our basic philosophy. Sarvam Khalidam Brahma. All of this, sarvam, everything, kalu, indeed, is Brahman. Where is God? The answer to that question is, where is God not? There's no place that reality does not exist. That reality is the foundation on which everything, every part of our daily reality is built, is constructed, it appears. Whatever we do, whatever we need to do every day of our lives, all of our responsibilities, our obligations, everything is written on that reality which is God, which is the divinity, which is the eternal. There's not a single moment in time when God is not experienced by us. And that is the sort of thing that we want our scriptures also to emphasize. And the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is a very effective example of how that particular idea is manifest. Every aspect of Sri Ramakrishna's movement that is being described here is the movement of a person who feels the existence, who sees the existence of God every moment. So when we see how such a person moves, how such a person lives, how such a person talks and thinks, we get an idea of that we ourselves can attempt to emulate, to understand, to appreciate. So that is the importance of of a book such as the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Yes, he did this, he went to this house, he explained this, he did that. We look at it in all of its details, and that is fine. That is one aspect of it. But the other aspect is that there is no moment when God was not present in Sri Ramakrishna's consciousness. So whatever he did, whatever he said, whatever instructions he gave, whatever even trivial things, what might consider trivial things that that are described in relation to him, all of that is immersed in an ocean of God consciousness. Our own daily lives are an example of that. Every aspect of our daily life is lived within God, is lived suffused and totally immersed in that divine reality. There's no way that we can get away from that spiritual reality, that infinite divinity. We say God is present everywhere, and then we generally forget about God until we get to our meditation period in the evening or the temple or whatever. Then we think we put everything else aside, and then we do our spiritual practices, and that's wonderful. That is highly effective, and it's certainly highly to be encouraged. But the truth of the matter is there is not 1 millimicrosecond of time that is not totally filled with divinity. Every moment we are immersed in the ocean of Brahman. We are immersed in the ocean of God. There's no way that we can separate ourselves. We can ignore it for some time. Eventually we will be forced to go back to that, because that is the reality. That is the way things are. Sarvam khalu idam brahma. All of this, sarvam, khalu, indeed, Brahma, is Brahman. There is no exception to it. There are no two things anywhere. There is God and God alone. That is the message of all religions. That is the message of the Upanishads. And by looking at Sri Ramakrishna's life, we see that this was constantly his mode of living. He was immersed in that. And whatever he did was infused by the Divine Mother, infused by the Divine Presence. That is the example that we're trying to follow. That is the gospel. The gospel means the good news, the good spell, the good news. The good news is that God alone exists, that there really is nothing else. And that is the message. That is the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It is the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is the gospel of every knower of Brahman. And because of that, we may, from time to time, only remember it. Most of the time, we're busy about doing this and about doing that. But the this and the that are also divine, are also that divine presence is totally imbued into everything, every part of our experience. Sarvam khalu idam brahma. All of the sarvam khalu indeed is Brahman. All of this is Brahman. God alone is present right now. God alone is the reality. We see the multiplicity. At the heart of the multiplicity is that divine reality alone. That is the message of Sri Ramakrishna. That is the message, the good spell, the gospel that is being spread in that way. Thank you.
स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्तां न्यायेन मार्गेण महिं महिषाः गोब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यम् लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु काले वर्षतु पर्जन्यः पृथिवी सस्यशालिनी देशोऽयं क्षोभरहितः ब्राह्मणाः सन्तु निर्भयाः ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शन्नो मित्रः शं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
The subject for next Sunday is Vedanta and Buddhism. This talk will be given by Swami Tattvamayananda, and it will be our celebration of Buddha's birthday. Childcare is provided during our Sunday lectures. On Sunday evenings, Swami Tattvamayananda holds an online class at 6 p.m. on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. The Zoom and YouTube links are available on our website's homepage as well as in the monthly email bulletin. On Wednesday evenings, we have Vespers with meditation at 7:30 p.m. in this auditorium. On Friday evenings, Swami Tattvamayananda holds a scripture class at the Old Temple at 7:30 p.m. Please use the auditorium entrance on Filbert Street. Shankaracharya's Viveka Churamani is the current text for study. The class is also streamed. This year, beginning in April, we have been celebrating our 125th anniversary. The next special program will be held in the South Bay on August 31st. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all of our services. After the lecture, there will be a question and answer session in Vivekananda Hall, and all are welcome. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.